Hi there, everyone. It's Russell. Welcome to the Reading Fabricator, and today I'm going to talk about a little science fiction slash drama slash young adult romance slash satire. It's a bit of everything actually thrown into one. It's a very short book called Landscape with Invisible Hand by M.T. Anderson, published about 5 years ago actually. So it's one of the more recent books that I've actually read, on top of the two Cormac McCarthy ones I read last year. Usually I try to read books in the past, but for some reason, this one stuck out for me based on the actual synopsis of it. And if I'm being perfectly honest, this book surprised the hell out of me. It really took me for a roller coaster of a ride over its very brief, about roughly 150 pages. As I was reading it, I was dead set that certain things are happening in the book, that it will continue throughout the book, that certain plot lines that were happening, it was like, oh, okay, I understand where this is going. There's nothing surprising here. But then it flips. It completely changes tone for me about halfway through, where what starts as basically a sort of a young romance between two characters sort of turns very cynical in the second half. I found it to be quite a nihilistic outlook on life in this book, which, based on the many themes and events that are happening in this novel, that in a way I think it takes place sometime in the near future, but it's very, very prescient, very relevant to today's society, in particular the way things are going from an economical standpoint. And I'm wondering if the author had that in mind when he was writing it, because there were certain sections in this novel where it spoke to me in quite an angry way, where I was responding to it very aggressively. The start of the book is basically these aliens come to Earth, and I think they're called the VUV, or something along those lines. It's pronounced VUVV. They show up to Earth around the late 1940s, early 1950s, around the same time where the whole UFO phenomena started happening in America, and subsequently just catapulted from there onwards through to today's society. And based on this initial encounter, this is how they view humanity, based on that time period of the 50s and the 40s, of that doo-wop music, the traditional romance of it all. And that plays out in this world here, which again happens sometime in the near future, whereby the rich and the poor are separated literally by thousands of feet, because all the rich people live on floating islands thousands of feet above the air, in beautiful housing where everything is pristine, where they get the best foods, and the poor people are just on the ground, just fighting to survive. And that is very prevalent in the very early pages of this book. When the aliens, I'm going to refer to them as the aliens because I still don't understand the pronunciation of VUV, or however they're called, but when the aliens eventually come to Earth, they colonize it, and they give away all their tech to the humans in exchange for allowing them to colonize the Earth. And it's heavily implied that these aliens have also colonized other planets and other galaxies. They seem to be quite well interconnected throughout the universe. They provide this technology that can just heal people instantaneously, no matter what their diseases, no matter what their afflictions are. But here's the catch: they charge for it. You have to pay an absolute fortune to do it, and this is where the economical factor comes into play, which can be prescient based on today's society. The poor people are struggling to even pay for it, because based on the aliens' economy coming into play with Earth's economy just is completely decimated. The exchange rate is horrific, and it only gets worse from there. The aliens have colonized the Earth, and over the many, many years, it just has gotten worse to the point where people are losing jobs. It's very hard to find jobs in today's society. So much so that a lot of the poor people are basically fighting with resumes to just get just these very pitiful jobs, working for the rich and the elite up in the floating islands, and for the actual aliens themselves. People that have university degrees, or are highly educated or highly skilled, cannot find work and resort to doing the lowest of low jobs for the high society and the aliens themselves. Where the whole romance aspect comes into play is the main character Adam, who is both a traditional artist, or an aspiring traditional artist, and a visual artist. His family allow another family to come in and rent the place in order for them to make a little bit of money. This family initially had a property, I think it's in Connecticut somewhere, where the aliens have put up a manufacturing or processing plant, which at the time, if the family had sold it then and there, when the economy was much more stable, they would have made an absolute killing. But now, many years later, all they got for it was $1. So this family moves in, and they have a daughter by the name of Chloe. And this is where Adam and Chloe sort of strike up a bit of a friendship, which eventually turns into a bit of a romance. And they decide to capitalize on this because, due to the aliens' interest in the whole traditional human aspect of the 1940s and 50s, they have this thing where you can actually broadcast your life and get subscribers from the aliens, and in turn make money from it. This is where the whole YouTube streaming thing comes into play as well, and TikTok and all that sort of thing, making money off of streaming your life to others. So you stream your life to the aliens, and they figure that based on their love of traditional human interests of that time period, Adam and Chloe, even though they are romantically involved, they decide to film themselves going on various dates in that style, and they make a killing off it. It goes very well for quite a while. And this is where I started to get a bit hesitant. I was like, well, is this book just going to be just a romance but set in this sort of sci-fi / satire aspect? And no, it doesn't, because by the halfway point, something really strange happens. This is where I'm going to get into a bit of a spoiler territory, because unfortunately it's very hard to talk about this book without getting into spoilers due to the fact that it's such a short book. So if this sounds like your kind of thing, then by all means switch it off, go read it, and then come back later. What ends up happening though is that Adam and Chloe eventually start to disdain each other. They begin to hate each other so much, and it shows through their streaming and their dates. And it catches on. The aliens catch onto it and eventually bring them up to basically almost court-martial them in a way, and to charge them with lying and providing a false narrative, in which case they have to pay all their money back. Now, being such an economically destroyed environment, they basically come up with the excuse, which is a true excuse, that they had to spend all their money to pay for food so that they could actually live. On top of that, you've got this second narrative, which becomes more prevalent in the second half, where Adam gets involved in an art contest, and the winner gets to have their art taken all over the universe and sold for basically millions of dollars to make them rich and never have to work again. And he becomes so self-obsessed with that the other character, Chloe, eventually just dissipates from the narrative. She's barely in it at all, which really took me by surprise, actually. She just ceases to exist in his mind while he's going through these very things. And he's also afflicted with, I think, Merrick's disease, which affects him quite badly, so he's in need of getting healthcare. And there's a section where him and his mother travel all the way to Boston, because once a month the aliens will send out a shuttle which will allow the people to go on there and get free healthcare for a day, but only a certain amount of people, and then they eventually have to shut it down and keep going and say, come back next month. And when they go there, there's just a line of people lining up for this thing. Again, a very prescient feeling given today's society. There's also a section at the very start of the book where his mother, who is struggling to find work, she's going to a supermarket and she's in line with a resume. And it turns out that every other person that's in line also has a resume and is trying to get this job. On the way home, they are walking next to another guy who was also there for the job. And she gives him her resume to show him that this is how she's done it. And he physically assaults her, threatens her, saying, if you get the job, I will kill you, because due to your resume, I know where you live. And it's little sections like that are peppered throughout the book where I was actually really shocked. I really don't know whether this is a young adult book or an adult novel, or if it's some sort of strange mixture of the two. But there are portions like that where I was completely taken aback and thinking, okay, where is this going? What is happening here? What can I get out of it? And I mean that in a good way. This is such an interesting, unexpected read for me. I don't normally read this kind of thing. So, especially when it comes to sci-fi and satire. I mean, the last satire I think I've read is by George Saunders, and even he has a very cynical, nihilistic tone to his work. But even though this book is, at its core, based on a romance between two kids in the first half of the book, there are a lot of cynical and very aggressively nihilistic undertones going on here. That I don't know if it's due to my reading perception of what I usually read. But that's just how that's what I took away from this short book, is just the anger that seems to be seething through the core of this narrative, especially with the main character Adam, who, as the narrative progresses, he gets more and more almost angsty. And it leads to what is probably my favorite part of the book, but is also the most anger-inducing, whereby he has an art teacher who basically not only convinces him, but just supports him in this art contest. The art teacher has a side job working as sort of like a guard, or just someone that stands by and helps the rich. He's talking to him, and a woman and her child are coming through, and you can hear the child screaming that she doesn't want to eat this. And they drop this package on the ground, and inside it contains this steak, this really nice cooked steak, which is very hard to come by on Earth, something that is a bit of a delicacy. It's got bits taken out of it. The child says, "No, this is crap, I don't want to eat it. So the mother, right in front of this art teacher and in front of the main character Adam, tells her to pick it up and give it to the art teacher, saying that, well, he obviously needs it more than us. And the art teacher's complete despair at the situation, seeing this half-eaten steak being given to him, and not only that, but the mother looks at him and says, "Well, aren't you going to show my daughter gratitude for giving you this food, because obviously you wouldn't be able to afford this where you come from." It was absolutely horrific to read, and in such a brilliant way. I mean, it's a brilliantly written section, but it really, really got to me. Little things like that allow me to come to the conclusion that this definitely deserves to be read, especially given when I checked Goodreads and found out that only a few thousand people have actually read this. There is something going on in this book here, something at the heart of it that I can't quite put my finger on, but it stuck with me, because I read this a few days ago, and I've spent the last couple of days just going through it in my mind, just trying to piece it all together, all the themes, all the things that are relevant to today's society. And in reality, I mean, the aliens are not a big part of it, really, when you think about it. They're just on the outset. But it's through their colonization that led to this human society just decimating itself, both economically and from a class warfare standpoint as well. Just little sections. I mean, it's not the best writing out there. It's nothing where you sort of have a stiff upper lip and go, "Oh wow, this is the greatest thing ever written." It's perfectly economical in its writing style. It just gives you the story, and you're all the more thankful for it, because in reality, you forget about the writing itself. It's the themes that pervade the narrative here with this main character, which leads to an ending which I'm a bit hesitant about. I think the ending was a bit of a cop-out in reality. I think they should have stuck to that really nihilistic, cynical tone that seemed to have been seeping through in the second half of the book, and really ran with it. But in reality, when I'm thinking about it, there was no other way he could possibly have ended this. This seemed like the perfect conclusion to go to. Almost no one had worked since the VUV came. They promised us tech that would heal all disease and would do all our work for us. But of course, no one thought about the fact that all that tech would be owned by someone and would be behind a paywall. The world's leaders met with the VUV. After meeting with international chambers of commerce and various lobbyists, the VUV happily sold their knowledge to captains of industry in exchange for rights to the Earth's electromagnetic energy fields and some invisible quantum events. Next thing we knew, the VUV technology was replacing all workers around the world. At first, it was just manual labor, factory labor. Slowly showed tech a product, a shirt, a swing set, a subdivision, and in minutes, tech could make it from trash. No reason for an assembly line for workers. We watched 1 billion people around the globe lose their jobs in just a year or two. My parents thought they were safe, white collar. So just from that passage there, you just get a history of what happened in the first couple of years of these aliens coming to Earth, providing this technology that just completely wiped out jobs for so many people. And that's another theme, is the idea of AI taking over jobs, putting people out of work. So that's another thing that's relevant to today's society. And I'm curious as to whether the author had the idea for this book many years before writing it, and just seemed to clue in on the fact of what was actually happening, and therefore providing a very prescient novel, or if he just took what he saw was happening at the moment of writing the book and just ran with it and took it to its logical conclusion as to what would happen in the future. I'm not entirely sure. I can't speak, but it's things like that make me realize just how horrific today's society is going, even if you were to completely annihilate the whole alien aspect of this book and just focus on the economy and AI tech and the class division system of it all. But there's also sections of the book where they're watching TV and they'll see all these events happening around the world that are in direct affiliation with what is happening, and leading to riots and that sort of thing there, which again is prescient to today's society. And there's a beautiful passage here which is quite informative. So we watched the news, and there has been a race riot in Central Falls. Security cameras show a bunch of white guys rampaging through a bodega, lifting up the Coke fridge and tipping it through the window, attacking the owner and his family with a baseball bat, screaming shit like "Go back to Mexico and leave us our jobs." They're stomping on the chips in the snack food aisle and showing their teeth like an animal pack. Some white woman standing outside on the streets in a terry cloth hoodie tells a reporter that if it weren't for those goddamn people, the censored illegals, everybody wouldn't be eating the grass in our yards on all fours. On another channel, the pundits talk about how lazy humans are, and how if they just go out there and get jobs, they'd be much happier. Somewhere in the Midwest, there has been a terrorist strike against the Vov agricultural transport. Human farmers ruined, desperate, getting revenge by detonating a fertilizer bomb in the back of a ship unloading romaine lettuces from space. Only goddamn thing left for me to do with my fertilizer, says an industrial AG farmhand as he led away. And the pundits talk about how if we spent less time complaining about the Vov and more time following their example, investing smartly in Vov tech, if we just get off our duffs, stand up from our barker lounges and go out and actually work, then maybe we wouldn't all be starving and demanding food we haven't actually worked for. This is quite an intelligent book. I'm going to go out there and say it. I think thematically it's a very smart book. Even though I was hesitant in the first half, that complete flip in the second half, where it becomes more overtly cynical in nature, really grabbed a hold of me. And through that, I was able to relate to the experiences that this character was going through, and to see all the ideas that are present in this book and how they are growing and expanding until the book comes to its logical conclusion. This is quite intelligent stuff. I'm really amazed actually at how impactful this book is, considering how compacted a novel it is in such a short time span. It packs a punch, and it does so in such a relatively short amount of time. I mean, you could read this in like less than 4 hours. What's also fascinating is the fact that there are certain chapters which are titled based on Adam's own paintings. And it's almost as if he's describing the chapter to you through his own visual paintings. There's little things like that where the author will occasionally just throw in a curveball like that, which will sort of make you think and see the writing style a little bit differently than as you did the previous chapter. And for that, I'm all the more thankful. It makes me approach this book even now, wanting to reread it in a more insightful way, and pick up on things that I didn't pick up on before. I think there's a lot going on in this book. I think there's a lot of ideas that are quite relevant. It's very prescient. And even if you're not a fan of the love story in the first half, stick with it, because it does something in the second half. It leads to something a bit more substantial. This is a very good read. I'm quite happy I read it, and hopefully you like it too. Thank you very much. See you next time.